Our role model of today is someone I've known for a long time. Stephanie Bismarck, you lead with digital and media education and child protection. And we are going to talk about all your learnings in those topics that you've been involved with for a long time. You're a prominent voice for safeguarding children in this digital world. You're an advocate, an expert, a best-selling author, a speaker, and now also a podcast host of your new show, How Do We Manage, where you bring together leading experts and thought leaders to explore the intersection of digital education, personal growth, and evolving demands of modern life. Steph, welcome to WeCan. Thank you for being here. Thank you for leading by example. Tell us what really matters to you and how you want to matter with all the things that you're doing.
Wow. First of all, thank you, Steph, to have me on your show and this way to reconnect. We literally know each other since we're children. Hard to say. But yeah, what matters to me, I guess a lot of things matter to me, but to the core, to boil it down to the core, I'd say that our or us being human in this time of highest technology and extreme speed of change
Mhm.
matters to me the most. And yes, I've dedicated much of my life to the young generations, meaning the new generations, children and young adults, and how they are, led into this world through education and prevention. But in the end, it's about looking at all of us and ask that question: how do we find that balance in this world that is changing faster than we are actually wired for? I think we're highly adaptable, and history has always shown that. But I'm slightly worried about the speed. And you can see that a little bit everywhere, that people are overwhelmed. You see the mental health curves are not looking great. So something tells us that we're doing something wrong. And I'm trying to, be on it and trying to find answers for that.
Yeah. So talk to us about that a little bit. You've been, talking and writing and showing up for those topics.
Yeah.
How can we manage in these times of rapid change in this technological revolution?
I think you're asking a monster question. And, you can only answer that in parts. I think first and foremost is an important factor to be aware what it means to be human, and that means to look at how we actually structure it, how are we built, and that means in this day and age mainly looking at our brain and how we're wired, and we're still very archaic. We're very ancient in our brains and our behaviors. We're still we're very highly social human beings. We're wired for belonging and connection, because that meant in the olden days that also meant survival. And all these things that we can now touch upon within our conversation, they haven't changed within us, right? And to believe that we can be, which has been a little bit the thing of probably the past decades, that we're trying to become as good as machines,
Mm,
as efficient and as good as we're never going to be as good and as fast. And I think this day and age shows us this even more so with AI and all the rise and all of that. No, I think we have to ask the other questions. Where are we stronger? What makes us better? And how do we create an environment that helps us thrive? And ideally, then technology is a tool that helps us make this better, but it shouldn't be around us to harm us. And that's what I see is happening in many parts, unfortunately.
Deb, and you have all those super interesting conversations around all those intersections where we as humans have to find the ways that make us human, that where we share authentically and vulnerably, where we can create more connection. What do you feel is important now for us to consider to keep our children safe or safer in these times, right? We sort of walked into this a little bit blind. this
Yeah.
technological revolution. We walked into the social media, we all embraced it. I mean, I didn't really think so much of it at the beginning. And as your children get older, you have to ask yourself really hard questions. And you talk about those things and you've written about that. So give us your insights on how we can all sort of try and build those boundaries in order to keep our children's mental health um, safer.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is one of those questions where we could talk hours about and where it starts and what ages you start and all this digital literacy and all of it. But in the end, it comes back to what I said earlier, is to understand what does it mean to be human and how do we thrive best? And looking at children is how do they develop best? And we know this, thankfully. Science these days shows us how we're structured, how, for example, children's brains are developing in a rapid speed when they're just playing. Formerly, it might look like trivial because they were just playing outside, but science now tells us that really what happens there is that they're forming all these new neurons. They're experimenting when playing. They're exercise, either doing risk taking when they're with friends. They're building communication skills. But all of that happens, face to face and in real life. And if we take that away from them because we are afraid, or which has also happened with, our generation or our parent generation, it's also awfully comfortable to put a screen in front of your face.
Mm.
Imagine your own, like this is like easy. So this electronic nanny kind of thing, where in the beginning we weren't all that aware of the real dangers and the potential harm, and also how these programs were set up to hijack our brains very deliberately to begin with. So we have to understand what it does to our children, and then and also understand that we thought this is an endless playing field and we're all going to thrive. It's going to be wonderful. No, raising children was complicated and time intensive always, and it is the same today. It hasn't changed, probably on the contrary. It is actually more challenging today than when I look back when we grew up.
Yeah.
So if I would try and make it really short, is please try to prioritize the big four. The big four is sleep, physical activity, meals, and in-person time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that sounds very basic, but it's really what is needed to develop in a healthy way. And if you have these kind of things, so I always told parents that, but who said, okay, how much screen time and how much this? And it's like, you cannot like put one boundary down. But what I always like to say is like, okay, look at your children. Do they have friends whom they do meet in real time? Are they thriving? Are they okay in school? Do they have interests that are outside of their screen? And do they do some physical activity? Do they regularly go outside to the fresh air? If you then add some screen time here and there, that's not going to be the world's end, right?
Yeah.
But if it is like, so in so many cases that these screens are put in mini children's hands, and yes, then they're going to be quiet because their brains are completely submersed in this whatever they're looking at. But then we're going into the dangerous zones because of developmental things. They're not meeting any friends. All of that, and that is dangerous and really negative.
Yeah, really unhealthy. Steph, so I'm wondering, you advocate for this topic, right?
Yeah.
And you've done that for a long time. What do you feel do we need governments to step it up to what? I mean, there are certain things now being taken, I think in the Nordic countries, I think it might be Denmark that just ruled that kids under 16 cannot be on social media. Like, do we need our governments to take real decisions on what should be the norm and what should not be the norm? Or can we sort of self-regulate, or should we self-regulate more than what we do now? What is your view?
Well, like for example, when you're speaking about Denmark, we're talking about the social media ban below 15. That's what Denmark
Mm,
just did, right?
mm,
But I'd like to point out, and Australia did the same on the 16, but still, this is not a magic bullet.
no.
And this is where I'm a little bit afraid that people are thinking, oh, they're not, if we do this, we're solving all the problems. It's
Mm,
like, yes, it might contribute to a little less exposure to some harmful content, etc., etc. I might even argue that it might actually be more helpful for some parents because they can then say, well, it's not allowed under the age of 15. It gives them an argument and also an argument towards other parents because I know a lot of parents that have told me, listen, we would love for our kids to meet others, but there's just not anyone out there.
yeah.
So yes, in that sense, you can argue that, but it will always only be a little like a little wheel within the entire clockwork, because there is also, you have to understand as a policymaker, and is like, will that eventually even create like hidden spaces where they're gonna start meeting where there's absolutely no control and no supervision. It's like now we're blaming the big tech companies for not acting responsibly, but imagine if we're so-called banning it, what happens in the shadow world, and then we have zero access. So I think policymakers have to really sort of anticipate unintended consequences. Um, and then this yeah, what I just said, this waiting for the law, I think is a dangerous thing. And also, how how do you think this is going to go? I mean, we're already having not a lot of digital literacy education in schools now. By the way, social media is already been banned worldwide under the age of 13. It's just very few people know that.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
has that helped our big problem? No.
No.
Do we think it's going to make it better if this is the only thing we're doing and just, amping it up to 15 or 16? I'm a little doubtful. And that's why I've been advocating that there is no way around the proper digital literacy education. It needs to go hand in hand with anything they learn in school. It's like, and also at home, it needs to be part of the conversation. What happens there, how to use it in a responsible way, why we're not using it in a responsible way. And, and then of course it starts with us. Because quite frankly, if you're the one who's sitting in front of the screen all day long, doom scrolling, as many adults do it too, and then you're making yourself zero credible if you're then telling your kids you can't be in front of the telephone. Your kids are going to, and rightfully so, they were going to tell you, man, get lost, quite frankly.
Yeah.
um and I've worked with young adults and children, and and there is even a recent survey that where they asked children what they really wanted between, I don't know what it was, between 8 and 12 or whatever it was. And the answer was less supervised, like more supervised play, unsupervised play. Sorry, I'm getting this wrong. More unsupervised play. They don't ask for more screen time. If this is the only thing they're getting, they're going to take it. But if you look at children who really interact with each other, who enjoy being with friends, who get, I don't know, let's put into nature and explore, then they are the happiest. And that hasn't changed so much. And it won't. And we just have to be aware of that. So education and prevention is the biggest component of all of that. And the last point I'd like to make is also, I've again, when I asked young people, and it's like they told me many times, I'm sorry, but where were you when we grew up with all of this? We have a gazillion questions. We taught them on, digital rights and privacy issues. It was like that generation isn't stupid at all. They're having questions and they are willing and they want to learn. But if there is no one who teaches them, then they're going to be self-taught. And how do we expect them to know everything if we don't stand by their sides?
Steph, and so you've been involved with that. I mean, you've really you've done deep dives in different education systems and how we can adapt. So tell us a little bit um, in your sort of learnings, what change do we need to see in our education systems to align with the speed of this digital age that our children grow up in?
I think, it depends a little bit on what country you look at and what challenges they're facing. There's no answer for everyone that fits. But I'd say that, all these digital tools, they're really just tools. Um, they need to be taught, but certainly not from a teeny tiny age onwards, right? I think, quite frankly, if you look at kindergartners and even preschoolers and all of that, they don't need any digital devices at all. Not at all. There's no positive effect in that. Later on, when they go into school, and then it's very much the decision of how the school is run, what the values they have, and all of it. If they integrate technology to make learning better and more interesting and more fun, we're talking about good content where the tool is used in a responsible way, then it's exactly how it should be. You look at Germany, you look at other countries where they're now debating these. We're not getting them. We're debating whether they should have phone-free schools. I mean, quite frankly, I'm shocked always that we're having these discussions because a phone is a disturbance. I mean, you and I know this. If we're having our conversation and my phone was ringing all the time, it would be really disturbing.
Yeah.
So it's not rocket science to
No.
this.
Yeah.
And they should have, environments where they can concentrate and when they can learn. And, unfortunately, learning still works that way that you have to engage your brain. You have to challenge your brain. It's got to be hard work. You don't sort of learn just automatically. If you look at academic content, right? Yes, when you look at little children, we said that before, they nearly learn automatically, but their brain does. But later, it just means work. It doesn't happen just by itself. So, and then within those curriculums, it needs to be, important to understand what is it from technology that harms us and what helps us. And that you can see in some countries they're doing it better, in some schools are doing it better. They have different value systems. Sometimes you have the same country. It's just run by a different headmaster or a headmistress, and they do a fantastic job the one, and then a few miles down the road they're failing miserably.
Yeah.
So it's really about us to understand what is needed.
Yeah. Steph, so talk to us a bit about your podcast.
Yeah.
How I know you're loving it. The energy is amazing. You got great speakers. What are the learnings of starting that podcast?
I think you learn a lot. I mean, I could probably ask you the same question, right? I mean, you've
Yeah.
been doing this longer, much longer than I have. But I am, I think, well, it stems from me being notoriously curious. So I'm learning very much myself all the time. And sort of the red thread is always the shifting perspective, getting more information for anyone who listens to look at things a little differently and just eventually make a more educated decision, or just sometimes, yeah, to look at things from a different side or angle. I think, and you might say the same, I don't know. For me, the listening component is
Mhm.
what I think is a big learning. Listening properly to what people have to say, and just taking it in, and not reacting right away, or you're just being there and listening and then learning from that. I think has opened up another. I've learned a lot there, and I think and I'm probably guilty of that equally, is we listen too little, you know. these days everyone has an opinion and utters an opinion all the time, and we have, basically gazillions of opinions if we open our screens. But the listening part is where you can truly learn a lot. And I think that's giving me yeah, I've learned a lot there, and I love it. I really do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And the listening and then the integrating,
Yeah,
right? To sit with what the other one has and to sort of alchemize what they said, then apply it to our own journeys or lives or stories or it always makes you think. And then there are some things that you just want to copy. I mean, I
exactly.
listen and I think, oh yeah, this exactly, this resonates. So I wanna integrate that into my life.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Steph's,
and that's what I love. Yeah.
yeah. So what does success look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked that a couple of times. I think success is a very, very individual thing. If I, for example, look at my now adult daughters and how they're, you know, living their life and doing what they love and working and are really sort of, two great adults with 2 feet on the ground. I look at them and I think that's a success. I'm really proud of them. So that for me is a big success. It's obviously not only mine, but it's something that I'm happy, and although it's a long road, and it's a rocky road and all of it, and goes up and down as life does. For me, having a next generation that is able and to critically think and to contribute to this world that we're living in, that is success.
Yeah.
And then, I guess at some point looking back to your life and understanding that whatever you did, you tried and you fought for your beliefs and you stood true to your values, that is success for me too.
Yeah. So what do you want your legacy to be? Sort of how do you want to matter in the world when you look back?
I don't know, that's if I could contribute to some change, I worked for a very long time in a very, and I'm still involved in these things. So in the areas of sexual abuse of children, online pornography, especially around children, and human trafficking. And when people have asked me, why and what do you do, and I frankly said, if I can contribute to the change of one life, for me, this is all
It's all
worthwhile.
worth it, yeah. Yeah.
And I really think it doesn't matter the quantity in the end, but if I was able to contribute to change and to contribute to making in some areas life better or easier for a few individuals, that would make me happy.
Yeah. Steph, so I remember you interviewed Tatiana Kotyarenko, who I also had on. I remember listening to that conversation. Yeah, that was a really amazing conversation. So how do
Yeah.
you lead? What kind of a leader are you and do you want to be and you aspire to?
In what sense? In what sense?
Well, I always think every one of us leads in one way or another, right? That's an important thing for me to get across also with WeCan. It's that every
Hmm.
one of us can lead by example. And so it's a bit a question about how do you show up?
Hmm.
What is important to you in terms of leading? And some lead with, academic research, and others lead with um integrity around something that's important to them, certain values. Some people want to lead with really being in the limelight and, talking to as many people as possible. And some people just want to lead with writing at home by themselves and, putting out what's important to them this way. So every one of us does that in different ways.
Mm. I would argue that's probably asking that question someone else about me would probably be better because I don't think I've ever asked myself how I lead. But always by example. And I truly think that one should you have to stand up for your beliefs and your
Yeah,
values and I'm not shying away from difficult things or different areas and topics in my life. I'm not afraid to shine the light on it, and I've also had a lot of setbacks and but that's okay if you stand up for what you believe in and not let yourself be pushed into a corner just because other people think you belong there.
yeah,
And I truly believe that as women, we do have to like stick together. And it's not always an easy thing because unfortunately, it's mainly the women who make it hard for other women.
yeah,
Which is why it's even more important that we understand that this is harming mainly ourselves, and how strong we can be if we stick together and always forward. Forward. I'm not someone who needs to look back all the time.
mm,
I don't want to be defined by what happened to me. I am the person I am today because of everything that happened to me, and that's fine. And I quite frankly don't want to be another person. So I'm taking everything that I had and what I had to go through and also what I learned in my life and then I can apply it forward in forward movement and always trying to, work together with other people in a positive matter or way.
yeah. I think you put that beautifully. So talk to us a bit about your journey, Steph. How do you feel you got to where you are today? What were sort of a couple of pivotal points that sparked your interest in the topics that you really want to make a difference in?
Yeah, for me it's an interesting thing because and I think it's a little bit what is probably important for a lot of people to hear that, I didn't what I studied at university, I after that never applied again, ever, you know. And I got married young. I was a young mother, and then I, s- I was involved in politics and different things, but then my children were teeny weeny, and then all of a sudden for example, had a meeting with someone from the International Red Cross who presented to me a folder that contained horrendous cases from all over the world and numbers and statistics about the sexual child abuse, especially what's happening in the online world. That was the early 2000s, mind you, so that was still when the internet wasn't that big everywhere and it was already rising in numbers. And I remember that I sat there and I was in complete shock because I asked myself, how on earth is that happening on such a scale and no one talks about it?
Mm,
That for me was one of those pivotal points that then I decided to dedicate the time I had on the side to fight that cause and to shine that light on these horrendous crimes against children. And I did that for a very long time, and I did that very loudly
mm,
and very uncomfortable. Um, but I truly believe up until today that the problems don't go away just because you look the other way.
definitely.
And the very sad fact is that the numbers and everything that we've been saying like 15, 20 years ago remains the same today. The only horrendous thing about it is all the numbers have just
Risen.
skyrocketed.
Yeah.
There is hardly any positive change in all of this. Whereas, for example, there is, ever since, by the way, there's always been technological possibilities to fight it. But it's not, especially in the European Union, it has been very, very, very difficult to apply technology against these kind of crimes because the very strict privacy laws. And I have always argued against that because I do believe that once you commit these kind of crimes against children, you are actually you lost your right to privacy, quite frankly. Um, but that was one of those pivotal moments in my life. And in the end, if you look back, it goes into all sorts of directions. I also moved to the United States. I lived there for about 11 years. The educational part has always been my the red thread. I stepped away for some time, a little bit from the sexual abuse and human trafficking um, area, and then concentrated a lot on the digital literacy because I saw, quite frankly, my own kids in American schools and how their digital devices were the normal and how little education they got around it, and it was frankly shocking. Um, so yeah, that's in the end that was one big pivotal point. But then it shaped my past 20 years for sure.
I did. Steph, so education is prevention, and you have really shown that in all of those different topics that you've been involved with.
Hmm.
What do you feel are the things that make you feel fulfilled and powerful and strong and aligned if you now think, for the next decades going forward with your life?
Um, I've worked a lot with myself and looked inwards, and did some major transitions in my life, and that was hard. And but I think today, because of it, I'm the happiest person that I've ever been.
Mm.
And when someone asks me, or this typical us getting older, and yes, you're seeing some wrinkles in your face when you look in the mirror, and all of that. But if you ask me if I want to be like 28 again tomorrow, I'd definitely say no. Not ever.
No
I'm
chance.
really no chance. I mean, I'm really happy somehow, but it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of work with yourself, and it's something that I believe is you can't run away from whatever you have to face in your own life. And often that's uncomfortable in one way or the other. I barely know anyone that just flies through life on a ever so lasting high.
Mm.
But hard work gets rewarded. And that you can apply to a lot of areas of life,
Anything.
um, especially also towards yourself. And yeah, for me, it's important to be able to look myself in the mirror and to be okay with what I've done and what path I've chosen, and and take it from there.
Yeah. Stefan, because you got so comfortable with being uncomfortable, I feel you are able to hold those spaces for those conversations that you're having both on the stage and off, right? And so I always think you can see in the people that are in the seats if they've done that work, because it just means that you're open and curious even about the things that make us uncomfortable. And that's the way for us to hold that safe space to have those conversations. Steph, so
Absolutely.
what keeps you up at night still? What are the things you're sort of mulling over and maybe even considering? What are those things?
Quite frankly, I think it takes me back to the original point. What keeps me up at night is what happens with our young generations to come, because I really see that we're doing a lot of things wrong. And I'm really, really worried about these future generations who, by the way, have no say in this because that's what we present to them. And that keeps me up at night because you look at, I said it a few times now somewhere else, but there is this, they call it the happiness index,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been measured since God knows when. But this quite recently is the first and normally the most unhappy happy generation was like us, the mid-age generation.
Yeah, yeah,
But now the first time in history since this index is measured, it's not us anymore. It's the young generation between
yeah.
20 and 30, whatever it is.
Mm,
And that keeps me up because I think we're that shows us that things are not right. And that shows us that the pendulum has to swing back somehow in order to find the balance. And mind you, so I'm not against tech. I'm a pro tech person.
yeah,
I just think that it just came over us like a big wave. And yes, we need to learn to surf it, but we also need to be aware of, what a big wave holds for dangers.
yeah,
And we're constantly behind all of that because of the pace and because it took us too long to understand the dangers.
yeah.
But it needs to happen, and just waiting for some law here or there is just unfortunately going to be too little. So that's definitely, worrying me.
Yeah. We need to use this in responsible ways, which you said earlier, and we need to hold people accountable for the things that go wrong when they go wrong.
Yeah,
Steph, so what
exactly.
about your plans and goals? What are those for the next year or next couple of years?
Oh, I have massive plans and goals. I want to, I was like, I don't even know where to start, but let's see where I end up with. We love to do like in person events around what we're doing with the podcast, but actually, having live events, because I truly believe that, getting people together is also what makes us happier.
It's medicine. Yeah.
Exactly. And connecting to others. And yeah, I'm working on a couple of projects. I'm involved in a couple of child protection projects internationally, which are pretty horrendous in itself, but this important work needs to be done, and it needs to be looked at. Tatiana, as you mentioned earlier, is one of those fantastic role models in that field. Um, I might write another book, who knows? But I'm open to a lot of things. And now, as you know yourself, my children are a little older, but I'm free as a bird. My children are adults, and I have a long way to go, and I have a lot of energy left.
Amazing. Steph, so what would you like our listeners to take away from your story if you had to sum it up?
Um, Never give up on yourself,
Mm,
because there's always a way forward. And no matter how dark the days or the weeks or the time of your life might seem in the moment, there is always an end at the tunnel. And there are the right people out there for you. So I'd say just put a warrior hat on and refuse to give up. And I guess I could say a lot of more things, but I think that's one of those where I'd say just pull forward and seek help, by the way. Another one of those. If you're struggling, or even if you're just uncertain, or if it's like, seek out the help. Not only, and I know that sometimes it's very hard to ask for help, especially if you're used to be an independent woman and all of it, and it's not easy. But people are um happy to be asked for help much more than one actually thinks so. And there is a lot of help and advice out there. And I actually think, for example, mentoring. Mentor young children if you can, or young adults, because there's so many of these younger generations that are really quite lost right now. So if you have a chance to mentor someone young and help them, guide them on their way through, you're gonna, do a massive job in someone else's life.
yeah.
So I think anyone can do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, your insights, your story, for leading with responsibility, taking responsibility, for connecting people, for talking about the important things, for making sure that we listen to the next generations. We need
Yeah.
youth and young people at decision-making tables, and you're making that very clear. And I'm just so excited to be reconnected.
Yeah, thank you so much for this great conversation. And I love your show, and I think it's really fantastic. So I'm looking forward.